2414 is a podcast about finding hope and common ground through casual conversation. Like the friends on the road in the New Testament, in Luke chapter 24, verse 14, we want to walk away with more understanding that leads to more conversation as the journey continues. Thanks for walking with us.
And that's how Calvin Coolidge became president.
You don't know anything about Calvin Coolidge. But we're going to find out today. That's today's episode, friends.
It's Calvin Coolidge.
Nope. No, it's not. No, it's not. Welcome to 2414. I'm Dan. That's Shane. We, after 50 plus episodes, we continue to not know what we're doing, but we're having fun. And we're just trying to have conversation both with one another, with guests, with you in a sort of passive, you're listening or watching way. But the goal is that this would be a catalyst and an opportunity to continue conversations, because that's where life is often lived.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to have expertise. We are in kind of a technical, more, teaching. We don't do a lot of teaching on this show, but we're in a season where there's kind of maybe some specialist knowledge, but hopefully it's being shared in a way that's conversational or inviting conversation rather than just lecture time.
Yeah, and hopefully it's good food for thought. Like you walk away from the episode with plenty to think about.
Yeah, I don't mind teaching. I don't mind learning, and even if this isn't an ideal conversation between you and me, Shane, if somebody listens to this and goes, "Hey, what do you think about the Bible?" Or "Did you know?" Or "Pastor Dan was saying this. I don't know what to think about that." Great,
cool.
Let's have that conversation. Talk through it.
Yeah.
Facts are our friends, and let's wrestle with it. Even your conversation might have nothing to do with the content. It might just be the feelings. It made me uncomfortable when he talked about this, or I'm excited about knowing this, or I don't know what to think about this, but it doesn't seem to fit with what I thought before. What did you think before? Yeah. And it can be your personal experience and not writing a paper on an academic topic.
Yeah. So ideally, we want you to be actively engaged, like listening from this, whether you're leaving with good thoughts, bad thought. I don't know. We just want you to
chew on it. And converse with another about it.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, we, as most of the time, almost always here, we like to share highs and lows, because that's where life is lived. There are normal things that are just everyday things, and we want to celebrate those everyday wins and acknowledge the difficulties of normal life. And maybe you had a baby or got divorced, and those are certainly real things that are momentous. But maybe your high or low is you spilled your coffee when you were driving. That happened to me last week.
While you were driving?
Well, I hit a bump. And I didn't manage my mug well, and so it splashed everywhere.
Oh, that's the worst.
And in the scheme of things, what a petty thing. But that's real. Or maybe your highlight was the St. Louis Cardinals had to come from behind and win in the ninth inning. And in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter, at least to a Brewers fan sitting across from me, but that was a win. Like quite literally for the Cardinals.
Literally a win.
We need everyone we can get right now. So anyway, we do highs and lows just as it's good for me. I enjoy hearing about you, Shane, and we want to model for people. It's worth taking 15, 20 minutes to check in with each other.
I would even set the bar lower. Like
take 30 seconds, just check in.
Take a minute.
Yeah.
Not to ask in a way that's like, "How are you doing?" "Good." "You?" "Good."
I'm just trying to acknowledge that we have a title and like a topic for our podcast, and it takes us 20 minutes to get there, but it's worth it.
Yeah, I think there's so much value in conversation that has been feels like it's getting more and more lost. Maybe that's just perspective and me getting old, but I feel like
it's hard.
We need to invest more in relationships and conversations.
Yeah.
It's good for everyone.
I think if no one listened to our podcast, it would hurt my feelings, but what I would miss is having the scheduled time. Hey, it's an hour plus where we're going to just go check in.
Yeah.
That's so good.
It really talk about the Bible, which
is great. So Shane, lows, highs, last day, week, hour, 7 minutes.
Yeah. let's say my high is that Lauren and I got our windshield repaired yesterday. So yesterday already. What was funny is that I booked an appointment for later in the day, and when we dropped the car off, they said it'll take like an hour and a half. We'll call you when it's ready. Okay. Sweet. Okay. We go home because we took 2 cars. We go home, getting some work done. I check my phone, and I got a text that said, "Your car is ready for pickup. Make sure to pick up before 4:45." And it was 4:38, and I was like, "Oh no, Lauren, we gotta go now." And I texted because you can like text the automated thing. Yeah, I was like, "Can we pick it up before 5?" Because they close at 5. They just want you to have it picked up before then. And they were like, "Yeah, you'll be fine." So we got in at 4:50.
What a thrill.
Yeah, it was a little, and I was on empty too. So I was like, I hope I'm not gonna run out of gas on the way picking this car up with.
Whose car is more likely to be on empty? If you and Lauren are getting in a car to go somewhere, which of you is most likely to have left it come on?
It's pretty equal. I'd say maybe me.
Okay.
Because my car, we use more so for local trips, local things in Federal Way. So if we need to go to church, well, just take my car, boom, boom, really quick. Okay. And most of the time it's pretty low, but it, can last 30 days on that.
All right.
So maybe me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your high is the windshield's replaced. Secondary high, you made it for pickup?
Yeah. Made it for pickup. Low is just that it cost money. Yeah. And the bright side is it was cheaper than our deductible, so it don't have to go through insurance.
So you just paid out of pocket.
Yeah.
Okay.
And won't raise our insurance prices.
Okay.
So that's kind of nice. But
it's all a scam, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I have insurance. Good thing I didn't use it. What are you paying for the thing?
Yeah.
You don't even want.
Exactly. I just that it defeats the purpose of everything. But it could have been worse. So there you go. Bright side of things or whatever. That's it for me.
Do you have any gigs coming up, by the way?
We do.
I'm not trying to advertise it. I was curious.
But this episode will come out before. So we're playing on Friday, the 28th. Yeah, July 28th. It's just a 30-minute gig.
This episode's going to come out after that.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. So this will be done before then, but it's just a 30-minute gig, and it's a really quick kind of thing. But it's a really cool coffee shop, Federal Way, Ebony and Ivory. Shout out to them. It's just a new, I think it's new, but it's a coffee shop that's
never in there, kind
of buried, in some the business area. So Ebony and Ivory.
All right, I'm writing it down right now.
Yeah, it's a nice just place to visit. They got a really cool treehouse place you can. I don't know. It's not a treehouse, but it's a suspended room. What? I don't know how to describe it, but it's a cool.
All right,
it's a cool location.
Check it out.
Yeah. All right, that's me. I've shared highs, lows. How about you?
Low. I've been tired the last couple of days, and no particular reason.
Fatigued or exhausted or?
I fell asleep yesterday evening watching baseball game. I missed the 6th inning. Just random nap like my dad kind of thing.
Certified old man.
Old man
right?
just falls asleep.
You're on the couch snoring.
And it was hard to wake up a couple mornings ago. And it's getting darker. I don't know if that's part of it. Yeah, just kind of little it is getting darker. So a little bit of fatigue. Just I don't know. I don't know if I'm not eating well. I have not started running yet, but that's my high. Is I'm ready to start trying. It's been a few weeks.
You're ready to try.
Yeah, my heel, Achilles. I've been really nervous about it, but I feel good. I'm going to give it a try. I'm trying to set parameters and limits so that even if I feel good, I'm going to stop at a reasonable time. And not be like, I'm invincible again, and then make it worse.
Is it entirely possible you could be all the way down your hill 5 miles into the run and your Achilles is hurting?
It's possible. Then I'll have to walk back,
stranded,
just limp home and the mercy of some passerby. So that's my one high. Is I'm ready to run, and another high. I mentioned the Cardinals won.
Yeah,
and then my other feels really good, excited for the future high, is I scheduled vacation.
Yes. So
I haven't had vacation yet, but it's on the calendar, and that almost feels as good as like the idea. It's like I feel like this is the closest I've come to a child waiting for Christmas in a long time. I have not done a good job about taking vacation, especially in a sustained chunk. It's just like, well, a day here or there.
Yeah.
But the idea of taking 2 weeks off straight, I don't think I've ever done in my professional life.
And
So I'm really excited.
you have plans for it?
But did I share this already in an episode? I feel like I did.
You shared it earlier today.
I'm still excited. I'm really excited.
It just makes me laugh. You plan a vacation and you don't know what your vacation is.
So I'm gonna spend a week at home doing chores, and then we're gonna get together with my in-laws down in Oregon for a week. But
the first half of that,
I'm gonna put my out of office message.
Yeah.
And I almost said away message for those of you who were in high school or college in the late 90s and early 2000s. AOL Instant Messenger.
Is that AOL?
Yeah, the away message. I'm going to set my away message from my email. Oh, that's what I'm excited about.
Getting AOL sent. No,
I put a lot of time into crafting away messages at college. That was a thing.
How is that different from an auto response?
Well, you got to be kind of professional if you're an auto response. It was the same function.
Oh, okay. It
was like Facebook Messenger. Only your like friends interacted with you.
Oh,
so you could be as sarcastic as you wanted, or inside joke as you wanted.
Like, hey, don't bug me. Haha.
Yeah. You also didn't have 1,000 or 10,000 friends or followers,
and probably not 10,000 emails either.
No, it was back in the day when I think it was called Friends on Instant Messenger. I'm not sure. Contacts, whatever.
Yeah.
Comment below if you remember what it was called. But you had like 20. It was like your actual 20 friends. It wasn't your whole high school. At least for me, it wasn't. It was. The only people who I was connected with through AIM, AOL Instant Messenger, were the people who I actually connected with in real life.
It still bugs me that on all the like social media or whatever, when they say friends, like Facebook, it's your friends. They're like, you're not how high or low are we setting this bar here? Like,
and the gap, the difference between who you have social media followers or you follow versus the people you see in real life is enormous. But my nostalgia in this moment was. It was like perfect overlap. The people who were my AOL friends were my real friends.
Imagine that.
Yeah, what an idea. And so my away messages were fun.
Yeah.
So anyway,
you didn't have to worry about like your boss or prof.
No, of course not. We weren't friends.
We weren't. Hated those guys.
No, but we weren't friends. You were my teacher.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't. Like there were, I think it was appropriate boundaries. You're my dad. You're my teacher. You're my next door neighbor.
Yeah.
You're that lady from church. We're not friends. We're not. Like if there's a platform for acquaintances from church or people who are grading my assignments, we can be in that category. But friends, we are not.
We're not.
All right,
that is hilarious.
Today, Shane, what are we gonna? Instead of a get to know you question, we've got a new activity for the day.
Yeah, we again playing this game called We Butcher a Game that you might know and love. And today's
butchering
is brought to you by Cranium. Is that right?
We found Cranium on a shelf and said, hey, I haven't played Cranium for a while, and let's not play it, but let's just take a part of the game and see if we can translate it to a podcast for our own entertainment.
Exactly. So instead of the question of the day, we're going to read from the data head category, which is
it's red.
Trivia.
It's red. There are 4 cards in Cranium. I don't have the box in front of me, but there were 4 different colors. Yeah, one, you spelled things.
Yeah, word puzzle. There's like art.
Some you like sing or act.
Yeah, like acting.
This one's trivia. It's a red card with a green alien on it.
Yeah. And let's say...
are we going head-to-head, Shane, or are we going to do this collaboratively?
We'll go head-to-head.
Okay.
Out of 3 each.
So just shuffle. We're not
so
picking.
We'll read each other 3.
Okay, but you're not picking hard ones. You're just gonna.
I'm just gonna pick a random.
Cut the deck.
One.
All right. Yeah. Go.
And
I'm ready.
True or false, you can't do. So if it's true or false, you gotta.
Okay, good to know.
I don't like 50-50.
3 questions each.
3 each.
Okay.
Best out of 3. I'll start with you.
Yeah.
What sport are you playing if you're playing the most popular sport video game in the world? Is it A, football, B, soccer, C, basketball, D, hockey?
I think the most popular sport in the world is soccer.
You are correct.
Okay. Was there a
You get
video
one.
game? What did it say about video game?
Yeah, popular sports video game in the world.
Oh. So I answered the question as the most popular sport in the world.
Well,
I would have guessed the most popular sports video game. Probably I would have guessed like Madden or something like that. I wouldn't have guessed soccer.
it is soccer.
Okay. Well, I got it right.
You got it right nonetheless.
Due to my misunderstanding of the question.
Yeah. All right. So you got 1 out of 1.
Okay, 1. You said not true or false. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Factoid. Answer the trivia question. Question. Before Mark Zuckerberg took over the world of social media with Facebook, his creation had a slightly different name. What was it?
Oh, I remember. I think this is in Social Network.
3, 2.
It was.
1.
It was like. Oh. I think it was like hookup or something like university related. I can't remember.
I think it's the Facebook. Let me see. Oh, Face Mash.
Face Mash.
Face Mash attracted 450 visitors in its first 4 hours online. Face Mash, one word.
Face Mash. I think that's in the movie Social Network.
Okay.
So.
All right.
All right.
1-0.
Rough. All right. Statement. All right. According to U.S. Census definitions, an establishment must produce or sell more than 100. Oh, sorry. Let me reread this.
Please.
According to U.S. Census definitions, an establishment must produce or sell. Oh, this is true or false.
Skip it.
All right. I didn't read that.
A listener's like, what was the question? You'll never know.
You'll never know. It was dumb. That's what the question was. All right.
Game.
On which talent show did CeeLo make way for Usher and Christina Aguilera step aside for Shakira?
I don't understand any. Can you please reread the question?
Yes. On which talent show? Yeah.
Okay.
On which talent show did CeeLo make way for Usher and Christina Aguilera step aside for Shakira?
I Dancing with the Stars.
It was The Voice.
So Usher was a contestant on The Voice?
No, like CeeLo make way for Usher. So CeeLo stopped being on the show, I think, so Usher could be, and then
one of the hosts.
yeah, because there's the 4 like hosts and chairs, and then Christina Aguilera was replaced by Shakira, basically.
All right.
So,
Whew.
all right,
That is not my world. Okay.
I don't know if I would have gotten either.
1-0 still. All right.
All
This is the odd couple.
Okay.
Pick the 2 things that don't belong from the list.
All right.
Category: original Parks and Recreation characters.
Oh no.
John Ralphio Saperstein. John Ralphio Saperstein. I didn't know his last name.
Okay.
Mark Brendanowicz, Tom Haverford, Ben Wyatt, and Andy Dwyer.
This is the two
Pick the
names.
2 that don't belong.
All right, I'll go with. I'll say 1, and you could just tell me if I'm wrong right away. Is Andy Dwyer not one of them?
You're incorrect.
Okay, I'd lost.
So I knew this one.
Yeah, of course.
I'm kind of a big fan of Parks and Rec. So John Ralphio and Ben Wyatt were not in the original season. So,
that means nothing to me. As much as
oh, it's such a great show.
sorry, everybody. Oh,
I make it a point to quote The Office every day around Shane, and sometimes Parks and Rec.
you're doing well.
We haven't had an Office reference today yet.
Well,
Okay, so it's still 1-0.
Yep.
This
All
is
right.
your third
I have
question.
a chance to.
If I get this, I win.
Yeah. It's okay. My odds are good. Odd couple again. So category, you got to pick the 2 that don't belong.
Okay.
Jenner family members.
Jenner family?
Jenner.
Okay.
Options are Kylie,
Okay.
Kara, Casey, Karina, and Kendall.
I'm going to say Karina is one of them. And can you read them again?
Kylie, Kara, Casey, Karina, and Kendall.
I'm going to say Kylie and Karina.
You were half. It is Kara and Karina are not Jenners.
All right.
All right, I got a chance
Here
to
we
tie
go.
it up here.
Here we go.
What 1940s vacuum
All right.
cleaner?
Here we go.
All right.
Question. Who helped revive and hosted Carl Sagan's Cosmos TV series in 2014?
Is it Neil deGrasse Tyson?
I had multiple choices, but
Is it-
you don't even need that apparently.
Is that one of the
That's
choices?
one of the choices.
I'm going to
lock it in.
Lock it
Sight
in.
unseen.
Yep.
All right, Shane. For those of you listening at home, the other options were Bill Nye, Mayim Bialik, that woman who was on Jeopardy for a little bit,
Oh, yeah.
and Adam Savage. Correct answer is Neil deGrasse Tyson. Shane.
Tie it up.
So are we going to overtime? Or do you just win since you exceeded the
I
expectation?
exceeded expectations.
All right, I'll yield, Shane. You,
I think a tie is fair.
yeah. All right. Well, congratulations.
We both lose.
I'd shake your hand, but you're too far away.
Yeah. We can use sound effects or something. I don't know.
We're good. We're good.
We're good.
Our listeners are like, just move on.
Please be done.
Please be done. That was not as entertaining as outburst. The verbal explosion has more than whatever craniums.
The cranium has, well, it was significantly less.
We could do the other ones of like take a drink of water and hum the tune to Gilligan's Island, or
It would be crazier. Am I motivated enough for that? Maybe not
we
yet.
had to record this earlier in the day or with more coffee if we're going to have shenanigans of that sort.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, today we're continuing our conversation.
What are we actually talking about here?
We're talking about can we trust the Bible? This is part 2 of 3 of our little mini section focusing in on copies of copies of copies of copies.
And last week we talked a lot about the how they were copied, whether they were manually copied, looking at word for word, someone in a room like reading it out loud and just copying it that way.
Yep. Some of the kinds of mistakes or that sounds so scandalous. Mistakes, errors, variations, corruptions.
Yeah,
These are all words that you'll read.
Yeah, I think like I don't know. I imagine like we wrote a lot of if you went to college or in college, you have to write a lot of papers, and odds are there's several steps to it, or rough drafts or revisions needed. I imagine when they were like transcribing, copying these, like there's no way they had rough drafts. They were like, oh, this like if something wasn't good enough, like you just copy the book of Corinthians,
right?
And like you finished it. You spent what 5 years of your I don't know how long it took. 6 months of your life to copy this. I'm all done, and then your boss or whoever is like, you missed this word.
It's the last page or second to last, and you skip a word. What do you do?
Yeah. I know you probably had a plan for this, but now I'm just my brain is just kind of going down this rabbit hole now of like what do you do? What do you do if you have a copy? You know it's wrong. Do you take your white out?
Are you? So you're talking about a scribe creating a handwritten, hand-drawn manuscript of the Bible.
Yeah.
And they know there's a mistake.
Yeah.
So
do you just concede?
So one question I have for you is, do you know you made the mistake, or is it the one you're copying from has a mistake? Because those are kind of different.
That's true.
They're both real. Those both happen.
Yeah. In my head, I'm imagining it like you have whatever the 200 AD Amazon mailed you the copy of I don't know.
So the one you're working from,
not even working from,
the one you're creating.
You they gave it to this community. Like we copied this here to use it for your church.
Okay.
And they're like, thank you.
And when you're copying it, you make a mistake.
Yeah. Or even like there's a mistake. You send it to them. It's like oh well. Like I don't know. That must have happened.
Oh yeah.
Right?
So Saint Augustine or Augustine, he talks about when you're interpreting the Bible, the first thing you need to do is correct your manuscript.
So
he assumes that your copy of this book of the Bible has need of correction.
Okay, so they normally did correct. Like you don't restart the whole thing. You can scribble.
I suppose
it out.
there's options. There are, you could scrape. They're working with different materials than we are today. So sometimes with that animal skin, you could scrape off what you'd done.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. Sometimes they'd actually reuse what we call paper from other purposes. So it was expensive.
Yeah.
So, you're going to have an opportunity to make a handwritten copy of the Bible or, a book of the Bible or one of Paul's letters. Mm-hmm. What do we have available? All right, this was our shopping list from last Christmas. We don't need that anymore. Scrape. And then now you're going to write your, copy of
using
Galatians
thinner
on top of it. Yeah.
Parchment or whatever.
It's like thick animal. It's like, think about it's leather of sorts.
Yeah.
So sometimes it would be the opposite. Sometimes there might be like Bible that was scraped off for some other purpose, and now through technology we can look at through whatever ultraviolet light and see both layers.
The indent of the writing in one.
Yeah, you can kind of see both layers of the text.
We really have that technology to
put a man on the moon, Shane.
We put
there's some.
We're reading that what do you call it? The stencil when you when you stencil, right? You I put a piece of paper on a
rubbing.
Yeah, like you
rub it. Rubbing.
Yeah. Is that called stencil, or is that when you trace?
Stencil's when you trace something.
Okay.
Yeah,
there's got to be a word for that. But yeah. So in some sense, that's what they're doing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's wild.
Yeah. So when there were mistakes, there's a variety of kinds of errors. And that's what we talked about this last week. Some of the unintentional kinds that would happen and you maybe didn't notice, or the person before you didn't notice.
Yeah.
And then next time we're going to look more at the intentional changes. So maybe the previous guy spelled a word wrong and you're going to fix it. So that first one might have been an unintentional mistake. He just transposed two letters, wasn't paying attention.
Normally, you're assuming it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, or it was to the scribe who's copying it.
Oh, okay.
And so if the previous person misspelled a word unintentionally, I might fix it, but I'm doing that on purpose. So that's an intentional change. Intentional doesn't mean nefarious or malicious, or I'm trying to change the Bible and I'm destroying God's word. I think most of the unintentional mistakes are very obvious, and it's the very same things we do when we're typing or writing today. And I think most of the intentional changes where they intentionally seems to have changed what their manuscript had, most of them are actually trying to be very faithful to the text. So even when they're changing it and they know they're changing it, they're not trying to break it. They're trying to fix it. So the goal was to preserve the text, to accurately copy it. And sometimes to accurately copy it, you fix what seems to be off to you.
And maybe this is a next week topic, but I'm assuming there's instances where people thought they were fixing and they were not.
Yeah, exactly. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. So I give the example this week. So I moved to Williamsburg, Virginia when I was in high school. Yeah. Everything's colonial out there. So
colonial as in like
old England.
Like the style of architecture.
Everything. So it's literally colonial. Williamsburg was a colony of Great Britain. So Jamestown was 1607, 1609, somewhere in there. Okay. So before, like 100 plus years before we were a country, there were British colonies here.
Oh, okay.
So everything is Old English. And so one of the shopping centers is called Old Town, and it's like OLDE. TOWNE. So yeah, there's architecture old, but also they just unnecessarily throw E's on words.
The color honor, or like British style
they have
of
U's
spellings.
in it. Yeah, so color is going to have a U in it, right? So honor is going to have a U in it.
Yeah.
Now, how do you what's the real spelling of honor? Well, like
living in America, but also this is like
context kind of matters.
Yeah, it's the style of the city you're in.
Yeah, so if you were copying some document from colonial Williamsburg, it would have all these extra E's, it would have extra U's, it would have this like F that functioned like an S, I think. Or
Does
like
it function, or it looks like an S?
yeah. Or like in German, there's the B. It looks like a B, but it's really double S.
Yeah. Oh, that's going to kill me. I knew the name of that. Yeah. I know what you're talking about. That weird letter.
Yeah. So like these aren't mistakes per se. Or also I think in different languages, at different times in English, the letters C and S are kind of, they sound similar and sometimes they function similarly.
But except when they don't.
Right.
Yeah.
So, if you're copying the word honor or old town, and you're in a different context, do you keep all the E's and U's, or do you say the word is honor, this is how we spell honor? And if you change it, are you changing it, or
does it change the meaning of it?
Right,
or
no,
does
certainly not.
Okay, so it's still the same.
But you did change a letter.
You did, yeah.
And you may have done it on purpose. Or maybe you didn't do it on purpose. You've been writing honor your whole life, Honor. And that's just how you spell honor. And you come across the fourth commandment, it says honor your father and mother. And you don't even need to look at the letters because you know how to spell honor. And so you don't look. And so you drop the U and just put the O. Sometimes on purpose, sometimes not.
It's still the same, yeah.
So I've got a number of examples in Greek that hardly translate to radio here, to podcast. So I won't
imagine squiggly
there.
lines.
Yeah.
There you got Greek, at least to me.
Yeah, I don't know.
I see pi symbols, and I see.
Yeah, sometimes words are left out. Sometimes words are added. Sometimes letters are left out. Sometimes letters are added. Sometimes letters sound the same. So I'll point on Shane's paper here and then tell my listeners, I have John 3:16 in front of us in Greek. And the word for destroy, like perish, that whoever believes in him should not perish.
Yeah.
So the word perish is apaletai, is how I would say that in Greek, apaletai. Other people in different accents might say it differently, but apaletai. Now the A of apaletai is the letter eta, apaletai, but the combination of epsilon iota also makes the A sound. So one scribe wrote apaletai with just an eta, and another person wrote apaletai with epsilon iota to make the same sound. In English, we have the same thing. There are letters that make the same sound. Last week we talked about there. So their house, there you go, there on the way.
Different theirs, but
spelled completely different.
But you might be able to figure out what it's actually saying.
Even if you wrote the wrong one, it would be obvious what you intended to write.
Yeah. And are these Greek John 3:16 passages, are these actual examples, or are they? Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
So I don't know how we.
Because I remember like last week you had different sentences, but
I made up an example.
Yeah. So these are actual.
Yeah, maybe we can figure out some way to post this. But what I have in front of me and Shane right now is a verse from the Bible, John 3:16, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the first part. For God so loved the world that He gave His only Son, and it has all or at least a significant chunk of the manuscripts. I'll just kind of speak black and white for a second here. Kind of all the manuscripts that we have and all the different ways those are spelled, misspelled, arranged, so that and then it lines them all up so you can see them. You can see where there are missing words. The dots on this piece of paper are where it was unintelligible. Maybe it was just they couldn't tell what letter it was, or a worm ate through the piece of paper, or somebody sneezed on it and we're not entirely sure what it is, or there's just a hole in the parchment itself.
Yeah.
But there are tools out there. There's a critical apparatus is what it's called in the bottom of the standard Greek New Testament that shows where other manuscripts have different readings so that you can compare them and say, oh, they all have this except these couple say something else.
And those are specific Greek Bibles, right?
Yep,
that
so-
have that apparatus.
Yep.
Not
So
like every copy.
not every one, but Nestle Aland is the name, Nestle -Aland. The 28th edition is out right now.
Okay.
You can find these online if you search for the Center for the Study of New Testament Manuscripts. Center for CST, and I don't know, we can Google it, put a link in it.
Yeah.
But you can actually look at the manuscripts themselves and compare where they have what.
where the differences are that we have.
Yeah.
That's kind of really cool.
Yeah, so
resource.
so one of them here, I can translate this, I think, on the podcast well enough.
Yeah.
So some of our listeners who know the Bible or have grown up around the Christian church might say something like, believe in Jesus. That's a phrase you'll have heard around church. Believe in Jesus, or I believe in Jesus. You believe in Jesus. But if you grew up with an older translation like the King James or New King James, you may have heard people say like, what must I do to be saved? Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and you will be saved. So older translations would say believe on.
Believe on.
And other translations would say believe in. So in English, in and on are two different prepositions.
Yeah.
And
They mean different things.
They mean slightly different things, and they actually have two of the same letters, but one different letter. In versus on. The only difference isn't an O or an I, and they're both vowels. So you changed one vowel, and it says believe on the Lord Jesus Christ or believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. But what's interesting is the Greek word behind those might be the same Greek word, but in English usage, sometimes people said believe on, other times people said believe in. So in our Greek manuscripts, the same change has happened where 9 out of 10 say believe in, whoever believes in him will be saved. Or not perish, but be saved. And there are 3 of them on this list, actually, that said believe on him. So just like in English, in and on are sometimes interchangeable, a few Greek scribes changed in to on because that's probably how they said it in their community, but it means the same thing.
And most have this in.
Yeah, it's when you look at the manuscripts lined up in its comparative chart, it's really easy to see how many of them have which reading. And then you can compare that to how old the different manuscripts are. You can compare that to, the scribe who wrote this one. Is that a consistent change throughout his? Like, does he make that same mistake? Maybe he's like, maybe it just sounds weird to him to say believe on, so he changed them all to in. And that's just his thing.
These were written long enough ago too, where I don't know. I feel like the dialect could have been more interchangeable.
Oh yeah. And the standard for what copying is, going back to our English example of honor, O-U-R or just O-R. It's not wrong. You're not changing anything, but what's the goal? Is your goal to just copy the squiggles correctly, or is your goal to communicate what it's saying accurately?
Yeah.
So Okay. So some of the kinds of changes, I don't know. Is that interesting, Shane? Is that terribly boring? I don't know.
I think. I mean, I think it becomes more lackluster like once you really start digging like into it, as in
it's not that exciting. There's nothing scandalous there.
It's
largely not scandalous.
There's like once you start breaking it down, there's nothing that's like faith altering about like, oh, I'm supposed to believe on Jesus, not in. My faith is in shambles. Like no, like it means the same thing. It's like
it's pretty boring.
Yeah, it's very minute changes. But I do remember talking last week, and I'm trying to remember if we did talk about it or if we talked about it after the episode. But we began a conversation on the time frame of a lot of
we did
this.
not get to that last time.
Okay, no, we didn't. Okay, so I'm a little. I know the answer kind of, but
But you might not, because
But I might not.
sometimes Christians are unhelpful and not very honest in how they present things.
Yeah.
And I spent a fair amount of time this last Sunday trying to correct what well-meaning Christians have communicated that's not actually very helpful.
Okay. So I was going to say something, but I'm also curious where that is going.
I got my thought.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I was just going to say, I think a lot of people would assume we have a lot of original, like, copies. Yeah, like very old manuscripts, for all the way back in 200 AD, 100, 300. But in reality, there's not a lot, from the early church.
Yeah, so we have no originals.
No,
and even if we did, we wouldn't know.
How do you define how to just
So
what sets it apart?
We have no originals, and what we do have they all have variations between them. And here's what well-meaning Christians, how they've communicated it in an unhelpful way. So Christians will compare the number and the age of our New Testament manuscripts to other ancient documents, and this is a good thing, by the way. This is all good and true. I'll signal when the unhelpful part is happening.
Yeah.
So it's true that from the event of Caesar's life to when it was written might be 1,000 years, and we only have 14 copies. And it's true that maybe it's Homer's writing. From the time Homer wrote something to the time we have the first manuscript, there's a gap of hundreds of years, and we only have a handful, dozens, maybe hundreds of copies. And so this is true. But what happens is that same chart will show the event. The next column will show when they wrote it. The next column will show the gap in years. And the next column will show the number of manuscripts. So it's going to say something like, I don't know. I don't have these in front of me right now.
You make it up, but
something like Suetonius's Roman history. He wrote it this time. Our first manuscript isn't for 900 years, and we have 4 of them. And then it goes down to the New Testament, and it'll say, the New Testament events took place or were written in like 70 AD. Or 90 AD. The first manuscript we have is from within 50 years, and we have 5,000 manuscripts. And what it makes it look like is that we have 5,000 manuscripts from within 50 years.
Oh. And it's just saying...
And that's not the case at all.
Is that from...
So what those charts are trying to say is the first manuscript for any of these events compared to any of these writings, the earliest one we have is within this window.
Within 50 years.
And so it is true. And by the way, the New Testament is better attested than any other document from ancient history by a mile.
Yeah.
Any classicist who studies Greek or Latin and makes their living off of it would dream to have the kind of
preserved.
Yeah, the number and the early copies that we have in the New Testament. Yeah. So the point is valid, and if this were some kind of battle, the New Testament wins. But that's not an excuse for being sloppy. So again, I'm sorry I don't have these numbers in front of me, but let's just say with Homer's writing, maybe we have 500 copies, and the first one is 800 years later. Okay, that's great. But with Homer, it might be that we've got 2 or 3 copies that are 800 years later, and then a dozen copies that are 1,000 years later, and then 50 copies that are 1,200 years later. So let me jump to the New Testament, because that's really what we're talking about.
Yeah.
The chart often shows something like, the gap between the writing and our first manuscript is like 50 years, and we have 5,000 copies. And that's true, but those are 2 different questions that don't actually overlap. So we do have very early New Testament manuscripts. So the earliest is maybe 130-ish. So the Gospel of John was written about 90 AD, and we have a fragment that's from about 120, 130 AD.
And is most of this carbon dated, or like?
I think it's a lot of things. It's ink, it's handwriting, it's beyond what I'm prepared to speak about.
There's a lot of methods of dating it.
And it's subjective too. So it's, there's a lot of subjectivity to it. But so we have an early fragment of the Gospel of John, but it's about the size of your cell phone, front and back.
It's crazy. It's something that small.
It's just a piece of paper, the size of your cell phone, and it's clearly the Gospel of John. That's not in dispute. But it's not the whole Gospel of John. It's just a handful of verses.
Just a segment of it.
And so that's our earliest. So within 50 years, we have a fragment of one page. We don't have 5,000 manuscripts. And even manuscripts can sometimes make it sound like copies of the New Testament.
Full written copy. So like 1,000 of those could just be
piece of paper.
Piece of paper.
So I don't have the numbers of how it breaks down, but a New Testament manuscript can be a part of a page. It can be a single page. It could be a whole book. It could be all 4 Gospels. It could be the whole New Testament. So all of those kind of get lumped into that number of 5,000 or so.
Okay.
And Shane and I have a chart in front of us which shows how those manuscripts are broken down by century. So it's not 5,000 within 50 years. So in that centuries, by the way, if you're not used to thinking in centuries, they always sound 1 century off. So the first century is the year 0 to 99. Because that was the first century, like after Christ.
Yeah.
So the
centuries always
right. So weird. I'm just slowing it. So second century is from 100 to 199. Third century is from 200 to 299. So the century is always one higher than it sounds like it should be.
Yeah.
So we have no manuscripts from the first century, from 0 to 99. We have 4 manuscripts from the second century. So from 100 to 199.
And these manuscripts again could be fragments.
So one of those 4 I know is that Gospel of John fragment, which is the oldest, which is again about the size of your cell phone front and back.
Yeah.
And then there's 3 other ones. From the third century, we've got about 50. So that's from the year 200 to 299. So by the time we're in the third century, we've got whole books of the Bible. We've got maybe even an entire New Testament.
And what are these four words of different?
So papyrus. I got this chart from a hopeful website, and they broke it down by sort of not just manuscript count, but the kind of manuscript it is. So papyrus is one that's specifically made on that reed paper from the Nile River. And then other are on different parchment, like animal skin. Some are written in all capital letters. Some are written in lowercase letters. It's like just different styles. And then a lectionary is what a church would use. So on a Sunday morning, they have the assigned reading for the second Sunday after Easter, the Gospel according to St. Luke. And so a lectionary copy, they weren't just making a handwritten Bible, they were making something for use in the church. So it's going to say, like, Easter Sunday, here's the Gospel reading, here's the epistle reading. Turn the page. First Sunday after Easter, here's the Gospel, here's the epistle.
Gotcha.
So it's still preserving the text, but it's specifically preserving it in a way to be read aloud and not just
not a full
book of the Bible
documentation, or a full copy.
So
that
it still allows us to say,
okay,
all right, let's compare all of our examples of Matthew 22.
Yeah.
But some are in just a Matthew version, and some are in here's the gospel to be read in church.
That makes sense.
So, so second century, there's 4. Third century, there's 50. Fourth century, there's 47 manuscripts. Fifth century, there's 64-ish. Sixth century, there's 80-ish. So we have a lot, and they're very early, but it really spikes around the 10th century, so 1100 AD. All of a sudden, we've got over 300, and then you jump to the 11th century, and we've got 800, just from the 11th century. And the 12th century, we've got over 1,000.
Do you still need it at the 18th century? Like at that point, it seems a little too close.
Yeah.
Like,
so somebody asked me on Sunday, why does this taper off? So it peaks around 13th and 14th century.
Yeah.
There are 1,000 manuscripts we have from that window. So where it starts to taper off quickly is because of the printing press is invented.
So did they exclude the printing press?
Yeah, so these are
From
handwritten manuscripts.
Okay.
So
Okay.
So when the printing press happens, is invented, movable type is a thing. It's still not like today. I mean, it was.
Oh, it still took a lot.
Yeah, not everybody had a movable type machine, and you still had to move all the letters.
Yeah, to type is a
movable type is different than typing.
Yeah, you had to arrange the individual letters.
Yeah,
and
like
the
one
spacing.
by one, you had to make this.
It looked terrible. When I actually found out how printing presses worked,
Right.
I was like, this sounds more work than writing.
Yeah.
I know it's not, but
it's one of the most, if not the most important invention in the last 700 years, and it's still awful by today's standards. It was god awful to see individual letters, which, by the way, you're going to get some of the same problems that we've been talking about with handwritten.
You could still mess up.
The difference is
On a larger scale.
Well, the difference is your one mistake is perfectly replicated.
Yeah.
So whatever your typeset is, everyone is going to be identical to that until the letter wears out, and now you've got different problems.
Yeah.
And there were problems in the early.
I'm sure there's a whole different.
So one of the
worms.
first King James, they left out the word "not" in the Sixth Commandment, and it just said, "You shall commit adultery."
Did it actually in the King James Bible?
Yeah, one of the early King James. So yeah,
and they didn't catch on to that.
not right away. Well, even now, I read academic books and like professional articles that have typos.
Yeah.
And these are PhDs with all the technology available. And I don't think I've hardly read a book without a typo.
Yeah.
Sometimes you notice it. Sometimes you don't care.
Sometimes you fly by it. But that is hilarious.
So you shall commit adultery. So when the printing press is invented, that slows down production, but not everybody had one. And there were probably some purists also who are going to make handwritings better.
Yeah.
And it just took a while for the technology to spread.
Mm-hmm.
So they were still, a century or two later, we still have 300-400 handwritten manuscripts after the printing press was a thing.
Yeah, the fact even in 1800, I know it's
1800, that's a little bit late. Like, come on, guys.
You catch up with the times. We're not handwriting these things anymore.
Yeah, I don't know what they're
maybe
thinking.
it's translation reasons. Like,
I don't know. Maybe it's hard to tell. Maybe it was a monastery that was just their thing. Maybe like to be a monk, you got to copy, the gospel. Or like I said, there's certain maybe purist, like vinyl sounds better than MP3.
Oh, yeah. Handwritten Bibles are the only thing I read from.
Which there's something beautiful about that, the activity of writing.
But an entire
no, that's nuts.
No.
So yes, it's true. There are more than 5,000 New Testament manuscripts handwritten, but it's also true that, probably 4,000 of those came after the 10th century. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. And it's also true we have very, very early manuscripts that are far closer than other documents from other Greek and Latin writers.
Yeah. Historically, there's still a lot preserved.
Yeah. So it's still no contest if you compare number of manuscripts and early, like the gap between, but it's not true to say or to make it sound like. In fact, I'd say it's not just not true. It's misleading to make it sound like we have 5,000 manuscripts from within 100 years.
Yeah.
Because we don't.
And maybe this is a whole rabbit hole that goes off in a different direction from where this episode should go. But comparing the history of Christ and what we have in the New Testament, how does that compare to how history was preserved when you're comparing with like Julius Caesar? Like in the methods history is preserved, I imagine it's mostly writing. Like I'm trying to think of other ways history could be preserved, like sculptures, maybe.
Oh,
I mean, like compared to other historical events of the time. I'm just curious how it compares into how well things were preserved. Because I absolutely believe that what the New Testament is saying is extremely well preserved, and it accounts for everything that is written. Like But I don't know, I'm just thinking of other things that happened around that time. Maybe around that Julius Caesar wasn't even close. I forget.
Yeah, so
his dates, but
if I'm tracking the question, I'm not actually sure I am. So
yeah, no, probably not.
so writing and sort of what we're looking at with the New Testament is what we call like primary source writing, so like first-hand material.
Yeah.
But we also have all kinds of writings from other Christians writing about these things, either about the teachings of Jesus or about their life as a church. So we have lots of writings from the first couple centuries about, hey, here's what it means to get baptized. Or here's why we need to be patient and love our neighbor, because this is what our Lord Jesus taught us to do.
And these aren't the like epistles.
Right, yeah. So this is not the Bible.
Okay.
These are just early Christians writing about these things and about their life.
Yeah.
Which is also how a lot of our secular history works. So you have some firsthand accounts. So there was a general on a battlefield who described it.
Yeah.
But you also have, a soldier writing a letter to his wife at home
that talked about.
Yeah, and then you might have a history book from the next century describing that battle. So we have all these data points.
Okay.
And what's remarkable is that most Christians, I don't think, usually even consider those as other supporting data points. Like, how did the early church write about these things?
Yeah.
We go like the Bible, and as a Lutheran, we jump to the 1500s, and then we jump to like today.
Yeah. And yeah, because I've learned here and there like some things about like with the Apocrypha and like
we're gonna talk about that in a couple weeks.
Okay, it's cool. But yeah, like I'm surprised I haven't like even really considered that much of just secondhand writings of like first century Christianity. Like it's bound to be,
right? Which is really significant. So you're asking about how does this compare to other world history stuff?
Yeah.
Other disciplines kind of absolutely depend on all that other stuff to fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
In part because we have so little firsthand material. I think one of the other differences is other world history events may have been safer to write about at the time.
Oh, that's true. You're not going to be...
Christianity is illegal and frowned upon, and people are getting killed. So that doesn't help. And there's also the question of motive, which is a fair question to ask of the Bible as well as other history things. So it's a fair question to ask, did the New Testament authors have motivation to embellish or to spin things to make themselves look good? And to me, the answer is pretty clear. There was not good reason to do so, because even if there was, they didn't. Like, they make themselves look bad. They make Jesus look really challenging. They look like idiots who don't understand it, and they've left in all these complicated, hard teachings.
Yeah,
that were not popular in their day and didn't have any reason. They didn't gain anything by them.
Definitely aren't popular now, too.
Right. So there were several. Like it doesn't seem to be anything to gain. Whereas when you're reading some of maybe secular history stuff, if they're writing a history of the empire, they're trying to please the emperor.
Yeah.
And so there's a little bit more incentive. The patron behind this document is expecting perhaps a certain kind of content or light.
Yeah. Does that makes a lot of sense?
And so it's a fair thing. It could have happened with the New Testament too, but let's be equal with our evaluation. If we're going to be, and we should be, critical thinkers, and let's look critically at Paul and Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but let's have that same critical eye for these other fields as well.
Yeah.
And you mentioned like statues. Yeah. And so Christians didn't necessarily have statues. They had churches, though. So places of worship very early on.
Well, think of all the history preserved in the European cathedrals early. I mean, that's like, past, 10th century AD, but still, there's a lot of history in that. That is really interesting. Like, we look at the Bible with, I say we, but like a lot of the world, looks at the Bible analytically very like harshly, but like truthfully, and that like, can we trust it? Can we believe it? But we're not like this harsh with many other fields of history.
Yeah, and it's also true that other fields aren't asking the same thing of me. So the claim of Jesus to be God himself, who died and rose and demands faith and allegiance, otherwise you burn in hell. I'm just that's a big ask.
Yeah.
Now
that's true.
Homer writes the Iliad and Odyssey, and it doesn't seem like he's pretending to write history. He's telling a story.
Yeah.
And so whether that story has been accurately preserved to what Homer wrote or not, I don't actually care. It doesn't ask of anything of me.
Nobody's livelihood, I think, is
so like it doesn't have a kind of existential value for me.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So whether or not Caesar did or didn't do something, like from a historical and academic point of view, let's get the right facts. But it's not like I need to change my life. I'm
based around whether
I don't need to repent of something.
Yeah.
Or I don't have to start giving money to an institution if Caesar did something.
Yeah. Whether that's happened historical.
I don't have to stop my bad habits or take up sacrificial love based on something Caesar did or didn't do.
Yeah.
But if Jesus is Lord, I probably should be charitable and sacrificial and loving and set aside my rights and all these things I don't want to do. So there's something about like the claims of the New Testament are asking far more of you than anything else in
simple history.
So
that's a good point.
And they're outlandish.
Yeah, they are out there.
So this guy had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, and he fed thousands of people. Come on,
like.
Now, to be fair, listeners, like I believe that, but I'm just acknowledging that's a big claim.
Yeah, like
that's weird.
This person performed all these crazy,
miracle, like
supernatural things, and like okay,
So the outlandishness and the claim on my life are both far beyond other things from history. Maybe not far beyond, because Homer's stuff is outlandish too. It's just not necessarily trying to be true.
I'm trying to remember. Does the Odyssey, Iliad?
He goes to the underworld and stuff.
Well, yeah. I mean, do they claim anywhere in it that this is factual?
So what's really interesting about that specific example is, my family, we just watched National Treasure 2 yesterday.
Oh, South Dakota. That's all we were talking about.
South Dakota, the President's Book of Secrets.
Yeah.
So is there and go back to number 1, is there a Declaration of Independence? Yes. Is it in the Smithsonian, wherever? I don't know what museum.
Probably.
Yes. Is there a treasure map on the back? I don't think so. Now, is that movie telling us true history, or is it telling us a fictional story that has anchor points or connections with real history?
Yeah.
And so some things are just like Narnia. Well, even Narnia, though. So in Narnia itself is this made-up land, but it takes place in England during the war.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it seems like... It seems like if you read the story or Lewis's introduction or the people who were around at the time, no one thinks The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe is historical.
Yeah, it kind of goes without saying.
Right. It's historical. It's not even really historical fiction, but it's fiction that kind of has a foot in history.
Yeah.
And so Iliad, Odyssey, they're talking about Athens and real places, and there might even be real character, real people from history who have a part in the story. But I don't think even the first listeners necessarily thought it was true.
Yeah. And I feel like...
But I'm not a scholar, I'm not an expert on Homer by any means, so maybe they did. I'm sorry if that's
far from me either. But it is interesting to think, if the writer really wanted you to believe this, I think they would have noted that. Maybe not. But I think these things happen, there were people there who saw it,
there's certainly different tone and character.
Yeah, if you want somebody to really believe it, I think you write it with a different intentionality.
Yeah, and so that goes back a couple episodes where we talked about those 8 tests that Lee Strobel mentioned.
Character.
Yeah, and the intention test was the first one. Can we look at this writing and discern what it seems like they were trying to do? Mm-hmm. And maybe we can, and maybe we can't with a number of these documents. Mm-hmm. And intention is only one thing. So maybe Homer intended it to be true. Okay, let's grant that.
Yeah.
Now what else? Now, okay, is there any reason we should think it is true?
Yeah.
So the New Testament is certainly pretending or saying or presenting itself as true. Mm-hmm. And then the next question is there any reason to doubt that or to believe that? Yeah. And so we can look at Narnia and say, does this read like it thinks it's true? Okay, maybe it does. Mm-hmm. What else can we discern? Oh, there's a preface where he said he's just making up a story for his kids. All right. So we can investigate around it and put a larger picture together.
Mm-hmm. It's just interesting. I don't dipping our hands in other categories in this episode, but it's kind of where my brain is wandering with things of it. Were there any other points from this Sunday?
We just talked about grammar. It was really boring.
Grammar.
I talked about how Greek is different than English, and word order. Yeah. Word order in English matters a lot, and it doesn't in Greek.
As in, people structure their sentences in different ways, yes, and everybody knows what they're talking about? Am I on the right track?
I use the example here. George threw the ball to Sam.
Okay.
So George is the subject. The ball is the object. Verb is to throw is the verb. Mm-hmm. Sam is the one to whom he threw the ball. George threw the ball to Sam. If I say that sentence, you know everyone's part in it. Yeah. So George threw the ball to Sam is very different than Sam threw the ball to George.
Yeah, that means something entirely different.
And George threw the ball to Sam is different than saying George threw Sam to the ball. See, I love that you giggle. Yeah, so in funny. Greek, word order is not how they communicate it. So if in my sentence today, George is the subject. Mm-hmm. So in your head, listener, you could have the word George and draw like a big S at the end for subject. Mm-hmm. And ball is the direct object. It's what he threw. So draw like a big D-O, direct object after ball. Mm-hmm. And Sam is the indirect object. It's the one to whom the verb was happening. Mm-hmm. So subject, direct object, indirect object. That's its function grammatically. In Greek, you can arrange the words however you want, and it keeps its function with it. So if I wanted to emphasize what was thrown, mm-hmm. I could say the ball George threw to Sam.
Are there like the ways you can tell what is the subject?
Yep. So in English, my made up example here is imagine there's the S is added at the end, like hyphen S.
Okay.
So in Greek, they have what's called case endings. So they will add endings to nouns and adjectives to tell you what part of speech it's functioning in that sentence, whether it's the subject, the direct object, it's possessive or indirect object.
So it's something you can see and also hear.
Yep. So you can see, you can hear it. It's spelled differently.
Okay.
And we do this a little bit in English. I could say to Sam, George threw the ball. Or I could say the ball George threw to Sam, but we're more limited. Yeah. In Greek, you could essentially put these in any order. You could say George, Sam, the ball threw, and it's emphasizing.
You can still
It's obvious. There's no question about which word is functioning which way.
Yeah.
But what this leads to is copyists would put words out of order because they were expecting it to go a certain way. So they transpose, they switch the order all the time, but it has no impact on the meaning because you can still subject, direct object, indirect object. Mm-hmm. So on Sunday I gave a little grammar lesson, and it was just about as exciting as this is right now.
I thought it was funny when Sam threw George at the ball.
Yeah, it's great. It's nonsensical in English, but if this was Greek, it wouldn't slow you down or create any misunderstanding.
That's just how the language functions.
Yeah, and this happens to me. I'm not a native Greek speaker, but having read the language for years, mm-hmm. I will still be reading, and I'll expect a different word order. Like sometimes Matthew might use a certain kind of order. But sometimes he uses a different order. But in my head, I will almost misread it. I think we gave the example last week. If you're used to saying Jesus Christ and it says Christ Jesus, you're likely to transpose that sometimes, and it doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
But you made a mistake. And so what we as English speakers can see with Jesus Christ and Christ Jesus, that same fluidity happens within really the entire sentence structure in Greek. So in the same way that Jesus and Christ Jesus and Jesus Christ, you don't even notice the difference. George, Ball, Sam, and through, it's equally up for grabs, and it doesn't change the meaning in Greek. So because of how the language is structured, it almost welcomes and invites more transcriptional errors. And now none of them match because they're all out of order, but they all say the same thing. That's kind of weird.
I mean, it makes sense, and I did not know that about the Greek language on that structure.
We'll do a little more on this, and then we're going to spend a couple weeks on how the books of the Bible were decided. Sound like super scary and manipulative when you say that. It's
I know
really boring.
There are.
It sounds like a great conspiracy.
I'm very interested in that.
My spoiler is it's not going to be that exciting with a conspiracy, nor necessarily very satisfying as an answer. That's my trailer, my teaser there.
Won't let you do the announcements anymore.
It's going to be great. This
is going to be really boring.
No, it's not boring. It's just like there wasn't this like secret locked door meeting, and how can we get more money for the church, and how do we suppress these other people? Like, it's just not what happened. But we will dig into that together.
I'm still looking forward to
me too.
That.
And then it'll be hard. It'll be challenging. And then a couple of weeks on translation after that.
All right. I'm translating. Oh, yeah.
Like
different than
now we have English.
Yes. Yeah. All right. I get it.
And then we'll be done with this for a while, and we'll interview guests and have fun and talk about normal everyday life things that we can all relate to
and have fun. This is somebody help us. We haven't had fun in weeks.
It's a little heady. It's a little heady.
It is.
If this is not your jam, it's probably kind of boring. You might just be like, hey, get back to like marriage and kids and funny vacation stories. We'll get back to more normal life. But this is good stuff too.
I'm enjoying this for the summer. I think this is a great way to create a series. We line it up with our Bible study. I'm liking it.
Cool. All right. Any homework for us, Shane?
Yes. I need you to.
I'm in.
Answer the trivia question with your teammates. All right. Okay. Legendary former Boston Red Sox batter David Ortiz
Big Papi.
is known to his fans by what nickname? The correct answer was Christian Yelich from the Milwaukee Brewers.
Big Papi.
Yep.
That guy could hit a ball.
He was a big man.
He was a big, strong man. He could hit a baseball real far. He was hilarious. Did you watch the home run derby here in Seattle?
No, because that's when I was in trying to find the Book of Secrets in South Dakota or whatever.
So in the home run derby, at one point they had Derek Jeter, Alex Rodriguez, and David Ortiz just like right behind the third base dugout. Just like they kind of had like they were mic'd up and they were part of the broadcast.
Yeah.
But David Ortiz had this enormous thing of popcorn and he wasn't sharing. So like every time they go like talk to him, he was just shoving popcorn in his face. And
that's hilarious.
Alex Rodriguez looked kind of annoyed at times. Derek Jeter was kind of cool about it, but it was David Ortiz just shoving popcorn in his face the whole interview.
Surprised they put those two together. Well, I digress. All right, this is all really interesting stuff having to do with the Bible. So, listeners at home, thank you for amusing us by listening, but also thank you for listening. And like we said, continue the conversation with somebody, or continue the conversation with yourself, and just.
Yeah, take some time to think about it. Turn your. This is.
I was gonna. You were gonna.
Go ahead, Shane. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say. You can continue the conversation with yourself, as in you can think about these things without a distraction in front of you. That's a TV, a phone, something like
My recent thing is
Yeah.
I've been driving with nothing on the radio.
I've been doing that as well.
It's been really cool.
Mainly because this is going to sound scandalous as a church, the director of worship and arts, but sometimes I need a break from music.
Yeah.
I just need to sit in the silence.
And I discovered about myself that if there was music on, my brain just turned off.
Yeah.
And I'd get home or I'd get to work and I don't always have to have hard thoughts, but it was just mindless.
Yeah.
And if I turn it off, I might think about the last conversation we had at work or the last podcast I listened to, or what am I hoping for out of this weekend? Just like, even if it's instrumental, classical, or jazz music, it's still a distraction to me.
Yeah.
So whether it's have a conversation, maybe you want to share this podcast with a friend and say, hey, I listened to this thing. I would love to get a beer with you sometime and like just hear what you're thinking.
Yeah. Be open-minded to hearing a lot. So all that to say, thoughts with yourself and thoughts with other people, they're very important to everything.
So thanks for taking the time with us, and we'll catch you next time.
Absolutely. See ya.
That's the end of the episode, but we want to continue the conversation. Continue the conversation by sharing this episode, subscribing, or leaving a review. Connect with us on Instagram at 2414 Podcast. Connect with us through email at 2414@stlukes-church.com. Or best of all, keep the conversation going by inviting someone to process with you so that you can each walk away with more understanding that leads to more conversation as the journey continues. If you happen to be in the Seattle-Tacoma area of Washington, stop by on a Sunday morning and say hi. 2414 is a podcast produced by St. Luke's Lutheran Church in Federal Way, Washington. To find more content, discover upcoming opportunities to connect in person, or to support the show, head on over to stlukes-church.com. Thanks for walking with us.